Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, all across the world. Just before getting on the air, I saw that the election seems to be coming to a conclusion. Hopefully, hopefully, what has happened is that we have retained a democracy rather than voting for a dictatorship. That would be a remarkable relief, not only to me, but I hope to all Americans, understanding that this was an election of great importance. And so many of us, more than ever, came out to express our votes. And no matter who wins, up and down the ticket, we must support one another as a United States of America. And what is it all about? It's not only for me and you, but for our children. Our children is the future of our leaders that will lead our nation to its glory of liberty and freedom and justice and equality for all. But let me just point out one thing. Let me flip this page, if I can. And let me point this out. The most important message is we are all God's children. Every one of us, young or old, whatever our skin color, whatever our faith, whatever we look like, whether our hair is blonde or black or red, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your skin color is, or your eye color, or what your size is, whether you're tall or short, thin or fat. We are all equally God's children. And I've said it many, many times before. God, in his wisdom, knew and has always been smart enough to recognize that as God's children, he wanted us to be uniquely different. And I've said this before and you've heard it. Why would God, the smartest, most concerned person for each human being, want us each to be uniquely different, have different talents, different capabilities, different mindsets, and different goals? What do you want to accomplish? And that, when we join together as one nation, working together, we can and will and have and must make the world a better place for all God's children. No exceptions. It doesn't matter who you are, or where you came from, or where your parents or grandparents came from. Just remember, when we look at each other, we're really no different. Inside, hopefully we have a brain. I think we have a heart. And more than likely, we have a soul which recognizes each of us may look different, act a little differently, think quite differently, but we are all his child. And therefore, we must respect and care for each other, not only today, but every day, whatever you do. Well, let me just tell you about something you may not have seen. And I'll just start off by saying that the Anti-Defamation League, NAACP, and LULAC represent the Jewish, African American, and Hispanic populations. As long as citizens of these three civil rights groups come together to speak out on the issues which matter to them and working towards the future we know is possible, Our best days will always lie ahead. So I want you to, if you want to, you could even close your eyes, but please think, as you've heard me say before, hatred is treason to democracy. Well, I'm old enough to remember Kristallnacht in Germany when Jewish businesses were attacked and the windows of their stores were smashed to smithereens. My question is, are we too dumb or naive to think that the contemptible desolation of gravestones, graveside tombs in America isn't a message of fear and hate? Well, please allow a 93-year-old World War II veteran to shed my light on those blood red painted gravestone messages. They reminded me of Nazi genocide shamelessly taking over the greatest part of Europe until the Allies overcame their strength. But not before. Millions of lives were lost and bodies torn apart with lifelong physical and mental injuries that haunt too many of us to this very day. Gravestones in a small Jewish cemetery needn't rattle our nerves. Huh? Nothing too important. No one was killed. No one was tortured or hung from a tree. But progress is when everyday Americans come together to chart our course, not to wait for tomorrow when today may be too late to end hate. The fact that headstones in a Jewish cemetery were desecrated with red painted symbols of hatred were accepted as a simple matter of fact without disdain by all three of the major organizations, ADL, NAACP, and LULAC. In those old days of 1933, the German Jews whispered among themselves, Oy vey, oh God. But did they or the rest of the German population decide to fight back? Mm-mm. Well, those of us with achievements, those of us who embrace the future and always will believe the better than the past as long as we advance our culture ahead. No silence indicated to acceptance that things will get better. Quiet in Germany was replaced by the Holocaust. Too late, before 6 million were forcibly moved out of their homes to be killed or incarcerated to be slave laborers doomed to die of starvation. Today, we are simply the country that you and I wish we were. Unfortunately, today we are greedy. We are self-indulgent. We lack any vision for the future. We're filled with fear. Yes, fear. We are racist. We dislike others, the things we are not. I hope you're thinking about that. We dislike others, the things that we are not. We simply aren't the country that you and I wish we are. Let me say, Trump is the symptom, but American self indulgence is the disease. How did we ever let that disease get so far out of hand where we are a divided nation? Not the United States, but the separated states of America. And when you looked at that map of the electoral colleges, you saw the reds and you saw the blues. What made me proud was to see the number of people who went out and voted in the reds and the blue states. But how they voted made your heart stop, wondering, are we not wise enough to choose the difference between electing a dictator over someone who will retain the values that we share as a democracy? Well, I don't know how you felt, and I know people in my family may have felt the opposite of what I do. I know certainly friends and acquaintances feel both sides of the story. But to me, every vote that came up in one way or the other, Biden is ahead, Biden is behind, Biden is climbing, Trump is running ahead. And then Trump says, doesn't matter, I'm not going to accept any of these things. I am becoming president. I won. What president in the history of the United States of America, facing an election, whether they won or lost, would say, the voting doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what you guys think. It's what I think. I won. When I said we're choosing either a dictator or someone who will retain our democracy, I'm not kidding. I've been saying that a long time, and I'm critical of the Democrats. They used the slogan that wasn't even close to what I was suggesting. Choose leadership over dictatorship. Instead, they used build better business. Huh? What does that mean to you? What if you don't have a business? What if you don't have a big business? Yes, of course, I know what they meant. If business is better, we'll all share, I should say, in the profits and the merits. That isn't the way it always works. Sometimes when businesses get bigger and better, the man on the top is not satisfied with making $2 million a year. He wants 20 million or 200 million. God taught us to respect the poor. Plant that 10th row when you're growing crops for food, to feed the hungry, to feed the poor. I don't want to make you think I'm a fool, but I really feel in my life I've had a partner who lives in heaven. And only yesterday, facing the calamity of my life, with my wife being not only critically ill, but I didn't think she was going to make it. I stepped out of my apartment building, walked across the street to the most beautiful cathedral possibly in the United States. And the building is fantastic. But what I love is there is a little park that the church owns. St. Martin's owns all of this property with gardens all around it. And in the front of that church is a little chapel made of glass, sides of glass, roof of glass. So when you sit in that small room, smaller than this room that I'm talking out of, you feel you are in God's heaven. And I sat there all alone, not in a seat. It's just a slab of marble that is on bricks. There's maybe 4 rows of that. And I sat alone, and I had taken the Bible, which sits on the front ledge, and I was reading the Bible, skipping from page to page for inspiration, making me feel stronger, ready and willing and capable to face the consequences if the doctor and the hospital would call and say, Earl, Natalie went to live with her God. It's about to happen, ladies and gentlemen. I'd be fooling myself, and I didn't know whether I'd have the guts or the courage to get onto the air this morning. But I always remember my Navy training. Never give in. Fight with all your might to gain victory over your enemy. Well, I believe that Biden ran a good race. I was very critical because I humbly thought it could be better. I'd never believe in talking about the issues. I think as a candidate for any office, we must be inspirational, looking ahead, what progress we can make to make ourselves a better place, not for me, not for you, but for everyone. That's God's message. And we should be following God's message. Well, I hope the Democrats, who outnumbered the Republicans in the total vote, which was astonishing, the largest in our nation's history, something that we all can be proud of. Staying at home when you're eligible to vote is missing an opportunity to change the world, hopefully for the better. You have nothing to gain by staying at home and saying, my vote doesn't count. Well, take a look at this election. We're looking at it little point by point. If Biden would only get to this point, to get what he needs to control the electoral college, just a couple of points here, and another point here, and another point there, he will be president. Or if Trump gets those votes in here and there and everywhere, another 4 years of a dictatorship. You may not agree with me. You don't have to. That's what is so wonderful about America. Freedom of speech. Freedom that we can say what we want to say without having stormtroopers coming in and saying, hang that guy from a tree. Let's shoot him dead right here. That's what America is all about. Respect and caring and giving liberty and freedom and equality for everyone, no matter who they are, as long as they're an American citizen. That's what an election is all about. Now, I'm too old to stand in a poll, and some of you know that I have PTSD, and I faint just for the slightest provocation. Can't get over it. It's just one of the things that the war is left in my mind. I can't stand seeing anybody getting hurt. As a hospital corpsman working with the Marines, it was my job to be just right with those Marines as we went in on every mission. And when somebody yelled, "Doc," I grabbed my little satchel and I didn't run over because the Japanese would have seen me running and they would know hospital corpsman, got to get him out. We get him killed, we've killed 10 more Americans. So I would crawl as fast as possible through the jungle, get through that 10 feet or so, and see a wounded warrior. And sometime, just looking at him, knowing the wounds cannot be cured, and all I could do was help try to relieve the pain and gave him a narcotic. That was the only shooting I did during the war. I didn't have a gun. It was illegal for a hospital corpsman to shoot a gun. But I shot morphine into my buddies to try to make their path to heaven a little bit more peaceful. It's a memory that just lingers with me, not only now as I'm talking, but day and night. It's 75 years ago. And if I accomplished things or failed at things, those memories are more important than anything. They truly were a matter of life or death, in that case of a human being. And sometimes when we're voting, we are choosing the matter of a life or death of a nation. Well, that's about the truth of America. That those of us with educations, those of us with achievements, those of us who embrace the future and always believe it will be better than the past as long as we advance our common good. If we don't do it, we are the suckers because we keep thinking that doing good things for people with less is our God-given responsibility. What I just said is God's message. We must do and serve people with less, which is our responsibility. God has taught us that. On the other side, when all they want from us and the world is a beer, the freedom to be lazy and self-indulgent, and to have a big-ass military and police force that can keep the wolves at bay for another day. Yes, living through the days of the Holocaust was one of those periods that left indelible impressions, particularly of what was wrong in this one Navy guy's mind. Well, I'm no longer that 17-year-old boy who knew it all when I joined the Navy. I joined the Navy to fight for freedom, for liberty, and justice. The Navy, frankly, was better than my college career. During my service years, I was taught to fight the evil enemy until we can proudly claim victory. Fight until you can claim victory. It's the reason I believe I became, over the years, the national marketing man of the year. And I was only in my early 30s at the time. I also became the first Houston advertising agency professional to be inducted into the Advertising Hall of Fame. Well, how did I do that? I didn't take the money that most agency principals took out. I kept reinvesting the money and increasing the biggest and best talent we could find in our agency. And that's how you build a business. You build it not by yourself. None of us are that smart. You build it as a team together. And that's how you build a nation. And since 1775, when the Pilgrims landed here fighting discrimination, that's how they kept building this nation to be better, better, and better. Till every once in a while, we get a little Adolf Hitler. Participating in the World War II taught me we don't accept Adolf Hitler. We don't accept the Donald Trumps. Okay, so you don't agree with me? What other president kidnapped 5,000 innocent young boys and girls and locked them up in cages? One in our recent lifetime. What other president said all those who served in the military were losers and suckers, while thou, coward in chief, took five deferrals, paying a doctor to claim that his feet wouldn't allow him to serve? You don't think that's enough? How many other things did he cheat? Yes, he cheated. And it's been proven that he used other nations to influence the minds of our voters, thinking things like Hillary Clinton was selling kidnapped babies out of a delicatessen in New York City. You're laughing at it? Too many people took it seriously. And I'm not saying Hillary Clinton was the best candidate. I think millions of people would have been a best candidate than that bankruptcy cheat who never paid taxes, income taxes, for 10 years. And in the last 2 years, $750 each year. Ladies and gentlemen, what do you think makes this nation move? It's the grease, it's the oil, it's the lubricant, it's the cash. We each contribute out of our salaries, out of incomes, whatever we earned in pensions, whatever. We contribute to the nation, to run the government, to do the things that we hope a civilized government will do, to build a military that is stronger, our competitors, so that they won't think they can walk in here and take over. We didn't do it and pay our taxes to build a wall to separate us. This president, instead of building bridges of love, bridges of acceptance for my great-grandparents, maybe your great-grandparents, and even my mom and dad, who came over here as refugees, escaping the Holocaust from Prussia. 3 years old, my mom and dad. And what did they see when they came into New York City? The Statue of Liberty, saying, "Welcome, all you tired and poor and homeless, into a land of prosperity." It's hard to believe, but I know it's true because I lived through it. Not at the very beginning. My mom and dad coming here lived in the ghettos of New York City, absolutely poor, impoverished. My dad, and I can't even explain it. I don't know how he ever became a baker. I know he never graduated high school. I know he couldn't write very much except his name on a check. He built a business that was national. As a baker, he decided, why should I be buying all of these ingredients from these various manufacturers? I'm going to start manufacturing my own. So he started with the flavors, the vanillas, and all the other little things. And then he did others and other things until he became the largest producer of goods that every baker depends upon and every candy maker depends upon. And from being that poor 3-year-old man or boy or toddler, he became a tycoon in industry, selling his baked goods all over the United States until one day the United States government came in and said, "Mr. Littman, we can't make baked goods for our military troops. We don't know how to powder milk or powder eggs. And if you could do that and mix the other ingredients, put it in drums, and we'll send that overseas, and our military will not only just get plain bread, but occasionally a cake to make them feel more at home." That's what my dad did. Out of nowhere. I don't know why, how. Powdered milk. He powdered eggs. He put all the other ingredients into big black barrels, and they were shipped overseas. And one day, on that little chow line, when I got to the end, I said, "Hey guys, there's a chocolate cake." We hadn't seen that. Little did I know, my father made it possible. Any one of us can make the world a difference, which brings up a question I love to ask. Can one man change the world? You're saying, "Oh, I don't think so." Well, tell me about one little woman, very little woman, African American. And you African American millennials should relate to this. The buses, when I was growing up, the restaurants, the movies, the schools, we were segregated. The white people in the movie theater went downstairs. The black people upstairs. Into a restaurant, the white people went into one restaurant, the blacks into another restaurant. And schools, all white or all black, totally segregated. I didn't know anybody that wasn't white. That's true. Until I got on that first troop train going from Grand Central New York up to the Great Lakes. And who was on that first train? Young men, my age, 17, 18, 19. Different skin colors. They were black. There was even an Indian guy, Latin guys. I went up to one of them, put out my hand and said, "Hey, my name is Earl. What's yours?" "My name is Max." "Well, what do you do for a living, Max?" "I milk cows." "Milk cows? We get our milk from the Sheffield milkman who drives a wagon with a horse and brings the milk inside." It was a wake-up call for Earl, coming out of a innocent lifestyle, saying not everybody is the same. We're all God's children, as I pointed out, and God made us different, uniquely different, so that we will have discrepancies between us. We can make selections in choosing, whether it's people or whatever we do. But those selections shouldn't be discriminate. They shouldn't be saying, I don't like you because you don't look like me. Uh-uh. That is not what God intended. I said, and I'm repeating his words, we are all equal. Our responsibility is to take care of those who need us to help them. How difficult is that to understand? Well, all I can say is I think I've accomplished some things. I mentioned what I've done in the advertising business. I'm as proud of the fact that I watched one of the leaders of the world come to the United States, get off the plane, was greeted by President Obama, and Mrs. Obama and the president took Pope Francis in hand and started to show them around New York City. And the Pope was in his own car after a while, riding down Fifth Avenue, and I'll never forget it. I, like millions of others, were watching every move he made, every smile he made. And I saw him stop that limousine. He didn't wait for the Secret Service, which I know surround him, but he walked directly over to the crowd lining the street and walked over to a mom cuddling a baby in her arms. I'm sure he didn't know what that faith was, whether it was a boy or a girl. All I saw him bend his head down, his lips moved in a form of a prayer, nodded his head at the mom, and walked away back to the car, and the crowd went wild. They saw what was happening. The Pope taking the time to bless a little baby boy, a little baby girl, whatever. And I said to myself, Earl, that is something you have a responsibility to acknowledge. Well, it was early before Christmas, if you remember. So I started to write a long letter to the Pope. And as usual, when I finished, I read it to my wife, and she said, Earl, as always, it's beautifully written, and he will be very much impressed. But it's Christmas, Earl. Do something a little more significant. I said, oh, okay. And I don't consider myself a very good painter. Yeah, I knew I could draw and I can paint, but I didn't say I'm a Michelangelo. Mm-mm. But I sat down and I painted what I thought Pope Francis would look like giving a benediction, not in the white gown and white skull cap, but I painted him in a bishop's uniform with the red and the gold and the hat peaked up to make him look a little bit more godly and acceptable to all the people. And he was giving a benediction, and I purposely had the hands spread apart, and I asked the young man who was on one of my podcast shows many years ago who did calligraphy, where you take pictures of people and you put it all together as sort of a sign. And he was doing that for school children, baseball teams or football teams, and putting all those pictures together. And the moms and dads would buy that as remembrances of when their little boy was playing baseball or football or soccer. But I asked this young man, I said, I want you to start when the Pope is a priest in Argentina, feeding the poor, helping the people get food, taking care of the homeless, and trace his track through his history until he gets to be the Pope and what he was doing. And that became my background. Not angels, not clouds, but the background of the Pope's succession, of the ladder of success, climbing to the top of his faith. When I say his faith, I don't know whether everybody is like me, but I don't have to feel that I'm Catholic to respect a man of consciousness, integrity, humanity, and the messenger of God. My faith may be different, but our message, I pray, are the same. So I sat down and finished that painting. I took it in to be framed. And while I'm in that framing store, which is one of those big giant stores, people kept walking by and asking the clerk behind the counter, who painted that painting? And she said, well, that gray-haired man standing right behind there. And they all came up to me and said, God bless you, sir. That is wonderful. And what are you doing with it? And I said, I'm sending it off right now to the Vatican. And they looked at me and they could only say, good luck, knowing how difficult anything, no matter how consequential you may think it is, would be acceptable at the Vatican. Well, to make the story short, January came and my wife Natalie said, hear anything from the Vatican, Earl? Not yet, hon. February, hear anything from the Vatican, Earl? Not yet, hon. March, the middle of March, a letter came in. It's marked the Vatican, a New York City address. And I said, the Vatican, New York City? I tore it open and then realized what happens most likely is that there must be so much mail coming to the United States, they probably send it over in pouches to a New York office, which is an office of the Vatican. And they, in turn, assemble it and send it to Houston or to other places around the United States. And it was listed by a Monsignor in charge of the Vatican office of New York. And I read the letter, signed by Pope Francis, thanking me for my gift of the painting, thanking me for what I had written to him, and most importantly, bestowing an apostolic prayer of a man he never met, didn't realize, not of the Catholic faith, but it was his blessing and appreciation for the time and effort of producing a painting that I'm so thrilled and proud to say is in the Vatican. When I was in the Navy at 17, 18, and 19, it never would have occurred to me. You don't know the trails of life that you will follow to make life not only better for you, but mostly how you can serve others. Well, let me just go back and say that is why a simple, ordinary guy from the greatest generation reacts to haters vandalizing the tombstone of the dead. It doesn't matter to me who is buried there. It is the hatred to democracy that motivates me to enlist 300 million Americans to join together as one nation under God, indivisible, to restore love, hope, and peace for every American citizen. Well, I'm going to invite you to enlist today. I'm not going to invite you to enlist in World War II as a veteran. That stands for the South Pacific. Instead, I'm going to enlist you to respect, to care, have compassion for whomever you work with, you meet, you greet. It doesn't matter. Remember the first chart? We are all God's children. Well, then let's act like what God has taught us for all God's children. To love thy neighbor. Love thy neighbor. That's America to me. Love thy neighbor. When I can get 300 million Americans like you and you and you, all understanding that we are a team, just like a football team, a baseball team, a soccer team, working together as one to win a victory over hatred. How do we do it? As a team working together, we love thy neighbor. Yes, we will, just like you do for your local baseball team. It doesn't have to be a professional team. It could be a high school team or even younger. When you wear the school t-shirt and the hat and have signs, yay, go Buccaneers, go whatever it is. But if I could get 300 million Americans wearing my cap, wearing my t-shirt, I thought I brought it up, but being so upset with what is going on with my wife, I just was lucky to even feel that I could put on this show. And even as I'm getting closer, I want to invite you to write me, send me an email, Earl at backourvets.com, and say, Earl, we want to begin. I want to be the first one on my street, the first one in my neighborhood, the first one maybe even in my city to show I, as an individual, am committed to enlist, to love thy neighbor. Because when I do that, that is America to me. And it will be America to you, and to everybody. That's our goal. To end the division, to end the evil of hatred, to learn we can be the best, biggest, strongest nation once again, where people respect us. And we will be the seed that will be planted, that will grow around the world, that everybody in the world, we, 300 million people, can change the world. Every day in the newspaper, on radio, television, I see they're battling in this country and they're battling in that country, all over hatred. Again, no matter which country we're in, We're all God's children. That's why I started that show, today's show, to point that out. Whatever our color is, whatever our heart is, whatever our soul is, we're all God's children. And as a corpsman, I learned very quickly, no matter what the injury is, we all bled red. Red blood. That's the unique similarity that we share. And we all have hearts. And I believe if we really think hard enough, we have a soul to learn to love thy neighbor. Love thy neighbor. God's most sacred commandment 5,000 years ago, during the time of the Hebrews in Israel, a tablet was found that said, love thy neighbor. 2,000 years ago, Jesus was on the cross, being nailed to the cross. He didn't plead to let me go. He only reminded everyone, love thy neighbor. Both in the Old and the New Testaments, it doesn't matter, ladies and gentlemen. You could see this. It's my Holy Bible. It's thick enough you could see. It's both the Old and New Testament. And I try to read it as often as I can. And what does it say? It all boils down to a few words. Love thy neighbor and take care of those less fortunate, the needy, the hungry, the homeless, the person looking for a job. That's our role in life. That should be our goal in life. And when we do that together, we will be not only the world's greatest nation, but God will look down, and just as we say, God bless us, God will bless you, and God will bless America. That's a promise.
You are listening to The Bridge. Share your opinion by calling 713-789-0096. Stay tuned.